Okay, this is lesson 4.2 notes, solving equations using multiplication and division. There are two key ideas or properties that we need to learn. One is multiplication property of equality, and equality has the equal sign in there. And basically what the multiplication property of equality says is that you multiply the same amount to both sides of the equal sign. Okay, and by the same token, division property of equality means that you divide the same amount to both sides of the equal sign. Okay, both sides of the equation. Okay, so then we have a couple examples here. Looking at example A, we have x divided by 3 equals negative 6. So our first step is always to rewrite the equation. And then we have to do the inverse property here. So if we have x is divided by 3, the opposite of that would be to multiply by 3 in order to get x by itself. So when we multiply, we write across on the outsides of each side, and that's because on this side of the equal sign, I can just make that 3 over a 1, and then using our cross products, we can see that 3 and 3 can both be divided by 3 for 1, and we have 1 times x. And that's what we want. We want 1 times x because that's going to give us x equals. So 1 times x equals negative 18. Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18. So we have x equals negative 18. And because we can see the 1x here, we don't necessarily have to write this twice. You could just go from this step to this step, but just to understand where that 1 times x is. Okay, over to part B, sometimes we have the x over to the left-hand side. Sometimes we have the variable on the right-hand side. Wherever you see the variable, you're just going to keep working down until you get it by itself. So in this case, we have 18 equals negative 4y. We are looking at what's happening to y to undo it. If you have negative 4y, that means negative 4 times y. So the opposite of multiplying a negative 4 would be to divide it out. So we write that right underneath. So lining up our equal sign, negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1, and 1 times y is y. And here we have 18 divided by negative 4. You can use your calculator to do that, or long division off to the side. We know that a positive divided by a negative is negative, and 4 goes into 18 4.5 times. So we have negative 4.5 equals y. Okay, you can pause the video and try the next 3 problems, and then come right back to check your work. All right, number 1, we have x divided by 5 equals negative 2. So the inverse of dividing by 5 would be to multiply by 5. Lining up our equal sign, 5 and 5 are 1. So 1x is just x, and negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Okay, over to number 2. Now we have the letter a. So negative of a means negative 1 times a equals negative 24. And we want a by itself, so we're going to divide. The opposite of multiplying is to divide that negative 1. And negative 1 divided by itself is 1. 1 times a is a, equals a negative divided by a negative is positive. 24 divided by 1 is 24. So we have a equals 24. And then for number 3, we have 3 equals negative 1.5n. N is being multiplied, so the inverse of that would be to divide both sides by the negative 1.5. And lining up our equal sign, any number divided by itself is 1, and 1 times n is n. 3 divided by negative 1.5 is negative 2. So So we have negative 2 equals n. Okay, so that is multiplying and dividing. Sometimes if the coefficient of x is a fraction, like in this case we have negative 4/5 x equals negative 8, what we are using is the reciprocal. So reciprocal, you'll recall, means the flip. And the reason we want to multiply by the flip when we have a fraction is because we want to get 1x. So for example, if I have 2/3, if I multiply that by its flip or its reciprocal, 3/2, okay, if we use our cross products, we can see that, I'm sorry, not cross products, but simplifying by a common factor. 3 goes into 3 once. And then dividing these by 2, we get 1. And 1 times 1 is 1 over 1, which is 1. So that's why we're using the reciprocal, is to that same idea of getting 1 times x. So again, we're going to rewrite this fraction problem, but I'm going to put the negative in the numerator because sometimes when you put the negative out here, it might run into your division sign. So this helps me see it better. Negative 4/5 can be written like this. It can be written with a negative in the numerator, or it can be written with 4 and then negative 5 in the denominator. So all of these say negative 4/5, but I prefer it in the numerator, so I can really see that right up there. So negative 4/5 x equals negative 8. To get 1 times x here, I'm going to have to multiply by the reciprocal of negative 4/5, which if I just flip those numbers, I'm going to get 5 over negative 4. And you can see with cross canceling here that I'm going to get 1x. But whatever I do to this side, I'm going to have to do to this side. So this is 5 over negative 4 as well. So you can use your calculator here to do negative 8 times alpha y equals. Type in your 5 over negative 4. Or you can use the calculator on our Chromebooks, which is Desmo's one, which you can then just type in that fraction. So if we do negative 8 times negative 5/4, you're going to get a positive answer, and our answer is 10. X equals 10. Over to part B, we have 6 equals 3/2 x. Multiplying by the reciprocal of 3/2 would be to multiply by 2/3. Again, the property of equality, whatever we do to one side, we're going to do to the other. Over to our right side here, we're going to just have x. And then 2/3 of 6, you could type that on the calculator, but you can also think of it as 1/3 of 6 is 2, so 2/3 is going to be 4. 4 equals x is our answer for part B. All right, again, go ahead and pause this video and try numbers 4 through 6 and then come back to check your work. Okay, welcome back. We have negative 8/5 x equals 5. The reciprocal of negative 8/5 is 5 over negative 8. So I'm going to multiply both sides by the 5 over negative 8. So that was step 1. And then we're going to get x equals, and when we do that multiplying here, we're going to get negative 25/8, which then we need to simplify. Okay, to simplify that on your calculator, you can go to alpha y equals and pick the third box down, and that's going to take your improper fraction and make it a mixed number. Or using some mental math here, we have bringing over our negative sign. 8 goes into 25 3 times for 24, which leaves us a remainder of 1. 25 minus 24 is 1. So our final answer here is x equals negative 3 1/8. Okay, for number 5, we're going to rewrite it again. And then the reciprocal of 3/8 is 8/3. So we're going to multiply both sides by the 8/3. And that gives us x equals negative 24. And lastly, question number 6, we have negative 14 equals 2/3 x. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. So we're going to multiply both sides by the 3/2. And obviously cross canceling here, we're going to have 1 times x, which is x. And 3/2 of negative 14 is negative 21. You can think of that as 1 and 1/2, right? 1 is your 14, and then half of 14 is 7. And if you add them together, that's 21. And then, of course, your negative sign. All right, so that is our calculation work and writing it out. On the other side is a couple word problems. So looking at example number 3, modeling real life. We have the temperatures at midnight is 56 degrees Fahrenheit. So midnight is 12. The temperature decreases 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit each hour. So decreasing, there would be a subtraction. So negative 4.5 for a drop, and then it's per hour. Hour is time. So every hour it's going to drop negative 4.5 degrees. When will the temperature be 32 degrees Fahrenheit? So the temperature at midnight is 56. To determine when the temperatures will reach 32, you have to find out how long it will take the temperature to decrease from 56 minus 32 to 24 degrees Fahrenheit. Write and solve an equation to find the time. So our model for this would be to have the change in the temperature, which will be our result, which would be 24 degrees. But remember, that is a decrease. So it's going to be a drop of negative 24 equals, and then it drops negative 4.5 per hour. So whenever you have the word each hour or per hour, you know that multiplication is implied. Okay, so negative 4.5 times every single hour. And we want to know how many hours to get a result of a drop of 24 degrees total. So once we have an equation, then from there, we're just going to use our multiplying and dividing rule for both sides. T is being multiplied by negative 4.5. So the opposite would be to divide by negative 4.5. Both sides. Okay, so negative 4.5 divided by itself is 1. 1 times t is t. And if you type this on your calculators, negative 24 divided by negative 4.5 is positive 5.3 repeating. So we want to know what time, when will the temperature be 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So what we need to do here is look at this 5.3 and turn that into time in hours. So 0.3 is really 1/3. 0.3 repeating is 1/3. So we have 5 a.m. and 1/3 of an hour. So 1/3 of 60 if we want to go into minutes, because there are 60 minutes in an hour. 1/3 of 60 is, well, 6 divided by 3, which is 20. So 5:20 a.m. would be the time. Okay, so 5 hours and 20 minutes. We're at midnight. So if we're adding 5 hours, that would get us to 5 a.m. plus the 1/3 is another 20 minutes. Okay, we have a try it problem. Very similar to the setup up here, but obviously a different context. You could try it, or we could read it together and follow along. The elevation of the surface of a lake is 315 feet. During a drought, the water level of the lake changes by -3 1/5 feet per week. So there's our per, so we know we're going to be multiplying that amount. Find out how long it takes the surface of the lake to reach an elevation of 299 feet. So we're looking at how much of a drop this is. So 315 minus 299 equals, and you can just type that out on the calculator or line up your digits. Either way, we get 16 feet. So that's a drop of 16 feet. And since it's a drop, we're going to consider that -16. So we want to know when -16 is equal to the lake changing from 3 1/5 feet per week. So we're going to have here -3 1/5 And weeks, we can use X. Or you can use W, okay? But I'm going to use X for the weeks. Because it says, how long will it take for the surface of the lake to reach an elevation of 299? So we're giving units in weeks, so we're going to figure it out in weeks. Okay, so this is a mixed number multiplied by X. We need a fraction times X in order to do the reciprocal work. So we're going to have to change this around here to an improper fraction. So we have negative 16 equals 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16 fifths, negative 16 fifths, X. All right, so the reciprocal of negative 16 fifths is to multiply by 5 over negative 16. And we're going to have to do that on this side as well. 5 over negative 16. All right, so over to this side, we're just going to have X because negative 16 and negative 16 cross cancel for ones, and 5 and 5 can also be divided by 5 by ones, and 1 times X is X. That's pretty much why we multiply by the reciprocal, is to get the 1X. Over to this side, we have to do some multiplying. You could always type it on your calculator. Alpha y equals 5 divided by negative 16 times negative 16. I'm going to do it by hand because I can see that the negative 16 and negative 16 can both be divided by negative 16 for ones. And I get 5 over 1, which is just 5. So X equals 5. What does that mean? Well, remember X was weeks, so that's 5 weeks. All right, that is our 4.2 notes for today on using multiplication and division to solve equations.